I was fully intending on using Sharon Moore's press conference as a springboard for today's episode, but then as I was in the car on the way home, I hadn't even left Ann Arbor yet. I had to pull over because after Sharon Moore had said at his press conference on Tuesday that he hoped to have his offensive coordinator in line sometime in the next 24 to 48 hours, Matt Zenitz from 24/7 Sports reports Chip Lindsey is the new offensive coordinator. Let's talk about what the new Michigan offensive coordinator brings to the table and more on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Tuesday. We are back and doing a Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I am your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. Sorry, I am looking at all of the. I just wrote up an article real fast. Wasn't really that fast. This is why, my plan was to have an episode up earlier. Didn't work out that way because now we need to talk about Chip Lindsey, the most recently North Carolina offensive coordinator. He has got an extensive track record. He's 50 years old. He brings a lot to the table. The more I dig into him, the more I like him. He brings kind of the same type of stuff that I liked from Joe Craddock. Now, credit to Steve Dace, who has been beating the drum over Chip Lindsey the last several days. To me, I know there were people on the message boards that were like, do not want. But if you look into what he has done, I don't see how you could look at it that way. He has had some absolutely prolific offenses. He has a similar philosophy as Joe Craddock in the idea that he wants to fit players to the scheme to the players rather than the players to the scheme. He's had just some really good production. Maybe not the most, not necessarily the most prolific recruiter, but he's a guy that's worked his way up. He started in high school football starting in 1997. He was doing high school football all the way to 2009 before he got, so that's 12 years at the high school level. He had assistant for the first, 7 years, then gets a head coach job for 2 years, offensive coordinator for another year. And of course, my article is just going to be annoying here and just keep on reformatting to something that's unreadable. Anyway, let's see if I can just do this way. If I do it this way, it won't do that. All right, this will work. Hopefully you can read my article because it's the pain that it keeps on wanting to reformat to something that's unreadable. So he got his start in Alabama. He's from Alabama. He was a wide receiver at a small school in Alabama. I can't remember offhand. I'm not looking it up right now. Probably should have put that in the article. I did not. But he was a head coach twice in high school football, but started off as an assistant, had an offensive coordinator job in high school football before he became the Troy quarterbacks coach for 1 year. And then he went back to high school football for 2 years. Okay. He's a teacher because that's kind of how it works when you're a high school coach and everything. So that means he loves to teach from what I've read. That's really good in terms of teaching the game and development, all of that stuff, especially a Bryce Underwood, who was a sponge, according to Connor Stallions. Lots of great stuff coming out of that. Then he went back to high school. They came out. He was an offensive assistant at Auburn. And then he ended up moving around, right? He went from being an offensive assistant at Auburn to being an offensive coordinator, which is what he has been, offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach everywhere he's been, except for when he was the head coach of Troy from 2019 to 21. Not a great tenure there, 15 and 21. Troy's a hard place to play and win. I know that the year before he took over Troy, I think upset LSU. And maybe that was 2 years before. I'm not sure the timeline there, but nothing really doing as far as that's concerned. And then he left there. He was at UCF for a year under Gus Malzahn, reuniting with Gus Malzahn, and North Carolina the last 2 years under Mac Brown. So he's worked with Drake Maye. He didn't develop Drake Maye, but he worked with him. That's always a very good thing to be able to put a guy in the first round of the draft as he had. Drake Maye would have obviously been that, but still, he's worked with a lot of really good talent. He recruited Bo Nix to Auburn. He left Auburn before he got there. His best year of recruiting was that Auburn 2019 class. But there's just a lot to like about what he has done in his tenure. Lots of different players that you look at. I think one of the more impressive ones, there's a name that you know, Tez Johnson from Oregon. Well, he got his start at Troy. starting in 2020, and he was pretty prolific in 2021. And in 2022, he was just a smidge better by 100 yards. And then he transferred to Oregon the past 2 years. So he's the one who found him out of Pinson Valley, Alabama. Most of his recruiting footprint is in Alabama and Georgia. So if even though he's not a prolific recruiter, he's not a guy that you're going to write home about necessarily. Basically, you look at his all-time recruiting list, it's like Alabama, 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 Alabama. Okay, so he's got a lot going there. But he's got a ton of experience. He's had, as an offensive coordinator in college, this is his 6th job doing that, coaching offensive coordinator and quarterbacks together. So that now kind of makes sense in terms of what he's going to bring to the table as far as that goes. As far as scheme, he comes from like an air raid type. He started with wing T and air raid in high school. And then he's worked under Todd Monken at Southern Mississippi and Gus Malzahn at Auburn and UCF. He comes from that school. So he's a guy he's going to smash, right? He's going to run. He's also going to throw. He likes to mix a lot of these kind of pro spread type things, getting the ball in the hands of guys that are going to be able to go downfield. There's just a lot that you're going to like about him. As far as what he's able to do production wise, he's had some really good years. But before I even get to that, I want to talk about what he said here. This is I got this from Inside Carolina, 24/7 I think site for North Carolina. He said this: the concepts are the concepts, and it doesn't really matter what you call them. But I think if I had to describe myself, it would be that we're going to build the offense around the player strengths of who we have. Obviously, we've got Drake Maye, so the passing game is going to be heavily involved, and we're going to do the same stuff that they've done here. But my goal is for us to be able to run the ball a little bit better when we want to run it and continue to marry up the things that I think fit our personnel, even in the run scheme. He tends to be more of a zone guy, but he's shown that he'll run gap schemes as well. So it's all kind of going to be able to marry itself together. He's able to take all of these different coaches he's worked under, and now he's going to be under Sharon Moore, who obviously he comes from various schools, Bob Stoops and Charlie Strong. Wait, no, not Charlie Strong. Wait, who was he under? Who was Sharon Moore under at Louisville? I think it was Charlie Strong. Don't remember. But he's obviously Sharon's mostly been the protege of Jim Harbaugh. Okay. So he's able to kind of, I would imagine you're going to see a marriage of the pro spread, and you're still going to see a lot of running the football because he's shown that he can run the football very effectively for a guy that's had Drake Maye, for a guy who's had some pretty good quarterbacks, Jarrett Stidham at Auburn. I think that he's actually going to be in a position where you feel like, okay, maybe you want to pass more than you've done. I've ranked this year's as not going all the way back to Southern Miss because CFB Stats, which is the site I use, doesn't go past 2016 right now in their database. So I ranked the last 6 offenses he had. We'll get to that, and I'll tell you what he did, how that compares to Michigan, and more of the outlook on Chip Lindsey here in just a moment. But before we do, get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, got to have a little bit of the elixir here. Just a soda tall boy here. Pop, whatever you want to say. Ooh, it's infused with apple cider vinegar. That's very exciting. I didn't know about that. Anyhow. So the best year in terms of production for Chip Lindsey came in 2022 when he was at UCF. There he had a heck of a quarterback's room. I'll be interested to see because 2 of those quarterbacks that he had that year are in the transfer portal right now. Michigan wants an established quarterback. Well, his main quarterback was John Reese Plumlee, so he was at UCF the year after Dylan Gabriel was there. But he had John Reese Plumlee, who was very, very good. But he also had Mikey Keene, who you saw earlier this year with Fresno State, and Thomas Castellanos, who is at Boston College. And a lot of people are looking at him as one of the top quarterbacks in the transfer portal. Both of them are in the transfer portal if memory serves. But that was his best year offensively in terms of total yards. 2022 was a heck of a year for big offenses. So UCF was 16th with 6,574 yards in that season. They played 14 games just like Michigan has played at least 14 games in each of the last several years. But that's better than any Michigan team. You think back to 2022 when Michigan's offense was rocking and rolling. That was the best year in the last four. Michigan had 6,423 yards. And Michigan ran more than it passed, 3,345 rushing yards and 3,078 passing yards by J.J. McCarthy. It went the other way just slightly for John Reese Plumlee and those guys at UCF. 3,337 passing yards. That would be enough to break the Michigan single season passing record if it's one guy. And 3,197 rushing yards. So, okay, here's the thing. He's got multiple seasons too. 2022 at UCF and 2017 at Auburn, where he's eclipsed 3,000 rushing yards and 3,000 passing yards. That's very, very good. Michigan had 1 or 2 years in 2021 and 2022 where they did that. And 24th ranked offense both years. So getting Michigan back to that balance, right? Because you look at what Michigan was this year. It was 35-31 in total yards. Almost 2,000 rushing yards. Another game to go. They should get there, but only 1,603 in terms of passing yards, okay? That is abysmal, obviously. We know that. But in terms of, he's never had, I should say, 1 year he's had a worse rushing season, but he's never had a sub 2,800 passing season since 2016 in terms of being the offensive coordinator. I didn't include Troy there. It's a little bit different because he was running the whole show. He has his own offensive coordinator, all that stuff. But so UCF, that was his best year. North Carolina 2 years ago with Drake Maye was 7th in the country with 6,386 in terms of overall yards, passed for just shy of 4,000, 3,889, rushed for just 3 yards shy of 2,500. Auburn with Jarrett Stidham and Kerryon Johnson. Lions fans know Kerryon Johnson. 2017 had the 26th offense, 6,323 yards total, 3,267 in terms of passing, and 3,056 in terms of rushing. And then I just want to get to last year, this year, actually, North Carolina, 37th offensively. Certainly defensively, it's been an issue more so. 2807 in terms of passing and 2274 in terms of rushing. Still rushed better than Michigan did this year. So he's done a very good job. He is mostly very balanced. He wants to throw the ball, but he wants to run the ball just as much. He wants it to be a strong balance. That fits in 100% with what Michigan wants to do under Sharon Moore. That is absolutely massive that they got a guy that has that philosophy. It marries up well to Sharon Moore. Here's what I was saying to Pastor Josh at my church, because he was asking me about Chip Lindsey about 5 minutes before it was announced. I said, listen, I need to look into the stats and everything. My plan was to pre-write, to get home and do the podcast and pre-write Chip Lindsey, because I didn't get any inside info. I just had an inclination that he was going to end up being the guy. And it didn't get that far, right? I had to pull over on the side of the road in Ann Arbor to be able to share the announcement. But here's what I said to Pastor Josh. I didn't really care, not knowing a ton about him. I knew that he obviously had coached some good offenses. I'd looked him up. I had saw the multiple stops. I knew that he was a Gus Malzahn acolyte. Todd Monken was new to me. But I knew that he had been in some good spots, okay? But I was like, okay, the biggest thing for me is that Michigan's functional. Because if you get the talent, you already have Bryce Underwood, you're going to get a transfer quarterback, there's things like that. I'm more concerned with functional than I am high flying, right? Like people were looking at Brendan Marion from UNLV. I would imagine he's going to end up either getting promoted at UNLV or going to Purdue with Barry Odom with his go-go offense. Like, listen, I don't want things that seem kind of more gimmicky. You know, I don't want to go full air raid. I don't want necessarily like some kind of weird crazy. I just want functional, because that's all you need when you have the players that you have. And it's best if you have what can be more of a current NFL pro style, which I think this will eventually look kind of like that, right? To be able to really take okay, what does Bryce Underwood do best? What do these receivers do best? Being able to get the running game going, because that's what Michigan wants to be known for, is what it does up front. But it's going to have a good marriage of all of these things to work the way that it can. Now, the good news is by getting a Bryce Underwood is, you can expect more deep shots. You can expect more downfield passing and things of that nature. But you can also expect to see more of the screen game, the vertical game, getting guys in good positions to make plays. And obviously, they're going to need to marry their personnel that they're going to be going after in the transfer portal to be able to make all of that work. I think this is an excellent hire the more I look into it. I think I said yesterday, if memory serves, or I maybe said this to someone off the record, I'm not sure. But the way I looked at it is Dan Mullen and Joe Craddock to me were grand slam home run types. And Chip Lindsey was more of a triple that clears the bases, 3 RBIs, but you've still got a guy standing on third, okay? This, I think, might be closer to the grand slam. Maybe it's like he's rounding third and then ends up staying. I think that's what this is. And Craddock is probably more that. I still would have preferred Dan Mullen personally. Again, that was a name that was floated to Bryce. But ultimately, I think this could be better overall because he's still, he's a guy that's got head coaching experience like Mullen. He's also recruited, not some of the most amazing recruiting in the world, but like I said, he recruited Bo Nix, who was a 5-star, to Auburn. Joey Gatewood the year before was a 4-star, 49th overall to Auburn. Bryce Baker, who's a current quarterback incoming at North Carolina, who's the 80th player in the country. And Javarius Johnson, a 4-star to Auburn in 2019. And Kamar Bell, a 3-star to Auburn. He was a guard in 2019. So not like a laundry list of incredible people. Like you look at Sharon Moore and you're going to be like, man, how's this guy not just the best with guys like Dax Hill and, just a bunch of really high-end players. But very, very good with some of the guys that he was able to bring in. And these were all guys he was primary on. He wasn't secondary on them. So I don't know what he's going to be like as a recruiter in Ann Arbor, but he's had a decent track record. Like I mentioned, some of the players he's worked with: Jarrett Stidham, Kerryon Johnson, Tez Johnson, Corey Robinson at Troy was the Sun Belt Freshman of the Year. He threw for just over 3,700 yards in 2010. John Reese Pumley, Mikey Keene, Thomas Castellanos, Drake Maye. North Carolina has a running back, Amarian Hampton, who's rushed for over 1,500 yards each of the last 2 years. I never even heard of the guy, and he's rushing for that much, man. That's pretty incredible. So there's a lot to like. Can't wait to meet him. Can't wait to hear more about what he's planning on bringing to Ann Arbor. Can't wait to just get the official announcement, all of that stuff. It's exciting. I know he might not be like the new hotness. There really wasn't anyone in terms of the it OC. The only ones and I, even though I had Garrett Riley on my list, and there's people that have Joe Moorhead or was oh, what if Lincoln Riley gets fired? I think that and by the way, he really looks at it as I want to have a more pro style version of what Lincoln Riley does. That's how he looks at it, his job, by the way. I think that there aren't those typical hot names. And if Michigan brought in some hot shot at this point who has the offense of the moment, I'd be a little skeptical. This works out well for what Michigan wants to do. And he's shown that he can have a top offense at some places that you don't necessarily always have top offenses at. So that's really good. That's what you want. All right, we're going to continue on. I want to get to some of the stuff Sharon Moore said at the press conference, as well as some of the other news. Obviously, we saw Dominic Savada's coming back, Mason Graham's leaving, all of that stuff. I want to address those things and more here in just a moment. But before we do, nothing delivers comfort and joy, quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. It's guaranteed perfection in every single bite. And right now you can save on unforgettable gifts with 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, score an extra $30 off with the promo code COLLEGE. With 5 generations of experience, they consistently deliver the world's best steak experience. And the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages featuring gourmet favorites. From legendary steaks to mouth-watering desserts and more, save 50% off site-wide for a limited time at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners get an extra $30 off with the promo code college. So 50% off at omahasteaks.com and an extra $30 off with the promo code college. Minimum purchase may apply. All right, let's get to all of the other stuff. Just a big cavalcade of miscellany right here. So Sharon Moore, I tried to ask him something. He didn't quite get what I was saying. Anthony followed up and asked the follow-up that was necessary. Because we talked on Monday. If I'm Sharon Moore, I'm being like, listen, I don't care about winning this game. I want to get guys just involved. And he says, we just want to win. We're going to do everything we can with all the guys that we have there to go win. That's the number one goal, to go win against Alabama. And we talked about recommitting, just like we did 2 weeks ago in the bye week, to recommit to your why, recommitting to each other, and doing everything we can to be successful. And I think we're in a really good place right now, mentally, physically, spiritually. Just want to do everything we can to win. That sounds like a Jim Harbaugh quote. And God willing, and the creek don't rise. You know what I mean? So there's that. Not how I draw it up. Maybe that's just what he's got to say. Maybe he really believes it. Either way, good stuff. I would more so temper expectations. Listen, I'm a very big believer, and this is what I learned at United Talent Agency. Is agenting is multiple things, and one of them is managing expectations. Right? If you want someone to, if you're going to do something that is you're going to be behind schedule, you don't think you're going to reach the expectations you have, whatever it might be, manage the other person's expectations. And then if you over deliver, then everyone's like, great. Right? This was kind of my issue with Michigan in the offseason earlier in the year, was because they were just like, we might actually be better than last year. And, when you say that, then if you fall short, people are going to be angry. Of course. Why wouldn't you be? But if you're like, listen, we've got a lot of work to do, and hopefully we can cobble together. I understand that this is Michigan football, and people don't want to wait. People want their expectations to be met. We're going to get there, but this is going to be a work in progress. Understand the hand we've been dealt, right? Like you could have managed expectations, and people would have been like, totally get it. But instead, Sharon said, there's no honeymoon. Okay, well, maybe you should have embraced that. I'm not blaming Sharon. I'm just saying managing expectations is huge. So given that there won't be a Mason Graham, which I tried to manage your expectations yesterday, and I went on some message boards of some angry people like, quitter, I can't believe he wouldn't play. Listen, if I was Sharon, I'd be like, maybe this was the conversation that was had. Unless you really feel like you need to improve your draft stock one way or another, and I don't think you need to, my guy. I think you did everything you needed to do against Ohio State. Sayonara. Good luck. Thank you very much for the memories. Incredible performance. Incredible job putting on the winged helmet. We will see you at another time. That's how I would be treating any of the first round draft guys. I would be telling them straight away, if you want to try to improve your draft stock, I don't see what you have to do that for. But if you want to really put on the winged helmet for one more go, because it's your final time strapping up with your brothers, then by all means, we'll get you a series or two. But we all saw what happened to Jake Butt. So go have fun. So there's some other guys I would expect to play the majority of the game. Amir Hall being like a guy, right? Like, as he wants to put on. There's some juniors that I don't expect to go to the draft, but like Jay Sean Barham and Ernest Hausman. I mean, they could go to the draft, and they probably could get drafted, but I feel like it would be day 3. Maybe they're like, hey, we're going to go out and try to make ourselves day 1. Go have a shot. I mean, I expect those guys back personally, but there have been times where I've thought guys should come back and they don't. So that I would be looking at it as like, okay, we need to get the guys who are going to be here next year as much experience as possible. Dominic Zavada coming back. That is massive for the Wolverines. Absolutely huge. It's weird that we're saying that of a kicker, but who is going to be behind him? We don't know. They brought him in I haven't seen Adam's Omaha dress. He's been in street clothes all year. So huge for him to be able to come in and have the year he had and then decide to come back for another year saying, let's win the Natty. By all means, man, love the optimism. Like where your head's at. So there's that. Let's see. Is there anything else that Sharon said? I mean, we were going to talk about some typos here from Maye. Usually happens on these 3,000 word, 3,500 word transcripts. But I put Jaden, listen, lineman. What are those conversations like? That's not a sentence. What I did this in my car on my iPad, by the way. But I was going to talk about the OC. We were going to spend the whole show talking about Chip Lindsey, just not with the idea that he was going to be in, right? Chase Herbstreit said Chase is a guy we've had on our radar for a while. He's had a really good career at St. Xavier. And obviously we know Kirk very well. But more had to do with Chase and his abilities and what he can do to help us as a team down the line in the future. I mean, I don't know. Like, that's okay. He says he interacted with Kirk Herbstreit. That's very cool. Talked about Mason Graham. Jaden Davis, I think, is the one that I'm interested in here. What's your message to Jaden Davis in terms of where he fits into the future? He says, yeah, just compete, man. Nothing's given. You got to go earn it. So go just compete. And that's what he wants to do. He just always wants to do that since he's been here. So that's just a message to him. So we'll be interested to see how, there's continuing transfer portal entries. They've lost a bunch of linemen, guys who you would have expected to maybe get a shot in this game, but obviously don't see much of a future going forward. Can we see Blake Frazier and Andrew Sprague in this game? I think we probably will. It's time to look towards the future. They're going to need to still get some guys. They're going to bring in Josh Thompson, but he's visiting 18,000 other schools, right? So we'll see how that all goes. I'm very curious to see. And now the screen's gone back to being stupid, so we can end this here. But I'm very curious to see who ends up playing, how this goes. And I think one of the interesting things, so I had asked Sharon, I talked to a former assistant coach, and they had said you learn the most about your team, or your head coach rather, when they go to the bowl game for the first time, because it's a week. Then he said, just want to have us get uncomfortable or comfortable being uncomfortable, and just do everything we can to get these guys to win. I hope that doesn't mean that we end up seeing the Michigan team go into early Harbaugh bowl game. I hope that these guys can have fun. I hope they can go out there and be loose. And I think Sharon probably learned that lesson in the last couple of years of the college football playoff. So it'll be interesting to see how he handles it. So that's that. Let's reconvene tomorrow as more news continues to happen. Tomorrow we got the Big Ten schedule dropping. We can talk about that and more things. So we will get to you then. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you again soon. Peace.